Hello everyone, we're all eagerly awaiting the release of Poppy Playtime Chapter 4, and today I'm going to share some crazy theories about Chapter 4. There are speculations that Chapter 4 might be the first chapter with more than one main antagonist. This theory is based on the fact that the character Yarnaby was initially highlighted and depicted as the main antagonist of the chapter until the release of the Doctor, Poppy Playtime. Chapter 4. Cinematic trailer, in which Harley Sawyer was introduced as the main antagonist of Chapter 4. We know that nightmare critters will appear in Chapter 4, and they closely resemble the smiling critters in design, with each nightmare critter contrasting with its corresponding smiling critter. This makes me think that there's some sort of rivalry between these two sets of toys. There might be something even more sinister in the relationship between the two toy lines, suggesting that Baba Chops devours the Mini Dog Day in the first teaser trailer. I believe that the new group dominates the smiling critters and presents a greater threat. Each chapter has made the game more difficult by introducing more and more threats, and since we know that Chapter 4 is the most terrifying of them all, it makes sense that the toys we'll face will be more dangerous than the previous ones. Furthermore, we know that Catnap used the smiling critters to carry out its tasks. So now that Catnap is no longer around, does Yarnaby see an opportunity to rise to power by using the nightmare critters for this purpose? What do you think about this? Is it possible? I have one very interesting theory about the red gas that could explain a lot of things. Speaking of catnap, I had long believed that the gas associated with it was exclusively its own property, but once I saw the Yarnaby trailer, I realized that the red smoke is making a return in Chapter 4, and what's even more interesting is that this gas seems to be penetrating deep into the Poppy Playtime factory through some pipes, but the question is, why? We know that red smoke is a sleep-inducing gas that can lead to manic behavior and nightmares. This explains why catnap was initially shut down, too dangerous to use. However, perhaps it is this very gas that became the reason why the toys in the factory became much more dangerous than before. Indeed, in Chapter 4, the toys are clearly becoming even more lethal, but considering that they've been gradually getting worse in the previous chapters, this is a logical assumption. Additionally, it's possible that the gas was used to control the experiments taking place deeper in the factory. If you closely examine the Yarnaby teaser trailer, you can spot grids, cameras, and surveillance systems. This might suggest that we're about to enter something like a prison or research facility with strict control. If that's the case, then using red gas makes perfect sense, as its effects could help control the behavior of creatures in such conditions. And it seems that in Chapter 4, we'll once again have to wear masks and be prepared for any unexpected situations. We also need to consider who or what might be inside these cells. The most obvious possibility is that these rooms contained failed or too dangerous experiments conducted by the company. However, I have another interesting theory. Maybe these cells hold children, and not just any children, but those who lost their sanity or were harmed during the cruel experiments carried out at the factory. This doesn't rule out the fact that Playtime Cozen could have used children as test subjects in their experiments, which would be horrifying but entirely plausible in the game's world. Additionally, we shouldn't forget that Playtime Co. might have collaborated not only with children or orphans, but also with criminals from outside. There's a chance they made a dark deal with the government to obtain test subjects from prisons, hiding their experiments under the guise of scientific purposes. So behind these cells, there might be not only the results of their research, but also the people they used as test subjects, regardless of their age or guilt. In any case, if the company was keeping anyone in these places, they would have needed strict control and security, and I think Yarnaby from Poppy Playtime is one of those security measures. Now let's move on to my theory about Yarnaby. Imagine this. A little boy, once an ordinary child named Quinn Navidson. He became so attached to Dr. Henry Sawyer that the doctor started manipulating his mind, trying to diminish his abilities within the PlayStation. This manipulation eventually led to the doctor brainwashing the boy, turning him into Experiment 1166, better known as Yarnaby. Initially, the doctor wanted to use him as a personal bodyguard to ensure his safety and control, but later, after Playtime Cutsers eliminated Sawyer, Yarnaby went through a profound shock and fell into a state of deep grief and despair. This could explain why Yarnaby looks so broken and uncontrollable. His sense of loss and pain likely stays with him, turning him into a dangerous creature. My theory is that the higher-ups saw the same potential in Yarnaby as they did in Sawyer, ultimately turning him into a kind of guard or surveillance tool in the prison. There's a good chance that the desk and surveillance camera in Yarnaby's trailer once belonged to Henry Sawyer. The higher-ups could have turned Yarnaby into a bodyguard to protect themselves. What do you think about this theory? Diving even deeper into the potential connection between Yarnaby and the prototype, I have a crazy theory that Chapter 4 clearly suggests Yarnaby might be stitching toys together, as seen with the stuffed Huggy Wuggy stitched with Yarnaby's threads. In the Poppy Playtime Chapter 3 trailer, we see the silhouette of what we think is the prototype, seemingly made up of several recognizable Poppy Playtime characters combined into one. And at the end of Poppy Playtime Chapter 2, Mommy Longlegs screams, "He will make me a part of him." Could it be that Yarnaby is the one connecting these toys to the prototype? If not, then Yarnaby could be copying Experiment 1006. Let me know what you think about this crazy theory. I have a super interesting theory about a new gameplay mechanic that might be added to the game, and I think it could really change the way we approach things. Aside from the possibility that Yarnaby could be a guard in a prison setting, which opens up a ton of new dynamics, we've also seen these strange eyes appearing on computer screens throughout the game. This suggests that someone might be watching our every move, which leads me to wonder about the potential new mechanic that could be introduced. If we look back at Deep Sleep, for example, there was a key moment where we had to use a gas mask to navigate areas that were filled with this ominous, sinister red gas from catnap, which was a unique challenge in its own right. It's highly likely that something similar, maybe even the same mechanic, could be implemented in the new chapter. But considering that the creators have already teased that Chapter 4 is going to be the biggest one yet, it stands to reason that there will be another entirely new feature that will add even more layers of complexity to the gameplay. After the official introduction of Pianosaurus and Poppy Playtime, I've been really intrigued by the idea of a secondary antagonist playing a crucial role in this upcoming chapter of the horror series. Given that Pianosaurus is this eerie musical toy with piano-like keys on its body, it opens up a ton of potential for unique gameplay mechanics centered around sound. The thought crossed my mind that, at some point in the game, you might actually need to rely on sound to track down Pianosaurus or figure out where it is hiding. Imagine having to listen closely to its movements, like the faint sound of keys tapping or eerie melodies in the distance, guiding you to its location, but also forcing you to stay alert and cautious at the same time. Building on that, I wonder if the new chapter will have you juggling multiple challenges simultaneously, like having to avoid surveillance cameras, listen intently for any noises, and perhaps deal with limited visibility because of the returning red gas from earlier chapters. The gas, which already made navigating certain areas tricky, could now be even more of a hindrance, creating an atmosphere of fear and tension. This combination of sound and limited sight could push the player to rely heavily on their hearing to survive, making sound just as important, if not more so, than their sense of sight. If they misstep or fail to stay alert, it could lead to dangerous encounters with Pianosaurus or other threats lurking in the shadows. This type of gameplay could add an intense layer of immersion and strategy to the game, where every sound could be a clue or a threat. Do you think this theory holds up, or am I just getting too carried away with the idea? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your take on it.